Welcome to Older Militarist Video TV, and we're lifelong Catholics, and what we do is all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church, and we'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're going to come back and tell you again from David Yallop the true story of Karol, Yallop, Wojtyla, and we welcome Brother Alexis to the program.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Ordo Militaris Radio TV, your unique apostolate, where we discuss everything in the light of the Catholic faith and we don't leave stones unturned, and where we believe that everyone should follow the rules. Everyone should live by the Catholic religion, especially clerics. And if not, you have a right to know. So you've heard a lot about John Paul II, Pope John Paul II. Bergoglio canonized him. Benedict XVI beatified him, I think, or allowed him to be beatified. I forget which was the distinction. But was he a saint? There's a lot of controversy. Now we're going to do we're going to unmask the real man and all the unheroic things he did. So remember, to be exalted to the levels of the altar in the Catholic Church requires that you live a life of virtue so outstandingly conformable to the gospel, to a Christian sense of virtue, that it's obvious to everyone. If your life is full of compromises, morally shady activities, dubious things, you're obviously not worthy of the altar, unless, of course, at the end of your life you became a martyr and you repented of it all. But if you didn't repent of any of it, you actually profited by it and pretended to holiness, then you're obviously not a saint, you're a fake. So we're going to talk about John Paul II. So we'll start with Karol Wojtyla as his baptismal name. And where do you want to begin, AJ?
Yeah, so John Paul II was born in Wojtyla, Poland, in the third floor apartment that was owned by a Jewish family, and the apartment next door was occupied by the Beer family, also Jewish. Regina Jinka Beer became a close friend of Karol's, and the first stage appearance as a budding actor was as her leading man. And close friendships with Jewish families like the Beers did not blind Karol Wojtyla to the realities of Jewish life, but until the day he stood before his overwhelming Jewish audience, he had never confronted or condemned what Yallop says is anti-Semitism.
Okay, so anti-Semitism is a term coined by the Rothschilds to punish anyone in public media who talks about their plan to control the world economy or to push certain narratives to break down Western civilization. So Yallop doesn't address that at all. I don't think he's even aware of the origin of that word. And he generally tends to the side of, thinking anti-Semitism is a problem and people have to look into it. He doesn't look at actually the historic question, what's the relationship between Christian and Jews? And it's the Jews who began persecuting Catholics first. They've been persecuting us for 2,000 years, although it isn't always at a high level. But in the modern times where they control most of the banks, and if you watched AJ's shows on the Bank of International Settlements, you understand how much power they have. But this is very curious, AJ. So I know that before the Second World War, there was a very large Jewish population in Poland. But a Polish family of Roman Catholics, was it unusual for them to rent an apartment from Jews and live in a building with Jews?
Yeah.
And does this have anything to, is John Paul II Jewish?
There is evidence that his mother was in fact Jewish.
Do we have the names of her parents? His maternal grandparents?
Yeah, that is one thing Yallop does not bring up, folks, but why would they
This is a question asked by many, and I have only seen claims that his mother's side was Jewish. I've seen 3 or 4 claims in the last 20 years where they actually go into surnames and stuff. And this is why the family was living in an apartment owned by Jews, because the mother knew the family. Now, while AJ is looking that up, I'll point you out that the word Jew means, and we've discussed this before, just as a review, the word Jew means different things to different people. And we should be very clear about what we mean by that. So there is the Jew by lineage, a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That the technical word for that is a Hebrew. And not all people today who claim to be Jews can trace their descent back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that would be in the male line. Then there's the biblical concept from the book of Nahum, which is the post-Babylonian exile, where God commanded Jews only to marry the daughters of Jews. And so according to the Bible at the time of Christ, you weren't a Jew, a son of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, unless you could trace your lineage back in father's and mother's side. And that's what you would call the religious definition. Then there is the observers of the law. Do you observe the Mosaic covenant or not? That would be religious practice. And then there are those who claim to, then there's the concept of a Jew who is someone who's a resident of the Roman province of Judea, or a member of the tribe of Judah, okay? And that's actually where the word comes from. The New Testament word, whenever you see translated in your Bible as Jew, it actually means Judean. There is no pre-Christian notion of Jew in the modern sense. It was either you were from the province of Judea, or you're a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, or you observe the Old Testament, and no one called those people Jews, okay? Because Jew is a modern word and has changed down through the centuries. So, and then there's people who just claim it on an ethnic basis. Are you a member of the group that claims some tie to these ancient peoples and goes around and goes to synagogues and celebrates Passover and stuff like that? And not all those people are members of the first three groups, okay? And not all the people who claim to be Jews today believe in the Old Testament or have a Jewish culture personally, or descend on their father's or mother's side. Matter of fact, the modern definition of Jew among those who call themselves Jew is a descent through the mother's line, which is not biblical, and no Christian would regard that as sufficient to make you a Jew. So just to clarify that. So AJ, his mother's family, were they Jewish in any of these senses?
Yeah, surname is Jewish. And she was of Lithuanian heritage.
Okay, Lithuanian Jews, just like we did a report on that American talking head, Gordon. The Gordons are also, Gordon is also a Lithuanian Jewish surname. So, and so that means if his mother's line is Jewish in any of those senses, modern Jews would have considered John Paul II a Jew by heritage, at least, and not by religion. And this is a very significant point, because sometimes I wonder, why are people getting promoted and some people not getting promoted? I see in a genealogy for Benedict XVI showing that on his mother's side, he's actually descendant of a 15th, 16th century rabbi in Prague. So is it a lot of Jews converted over the centuries, and a lot of Europeans have Jewish descent in some way. After 2,000 years, you wouldn't be surprised to find many people with some ethnic connections during all those generations have married, because a lot of Jews converted to Christianity and thought Christianity is the religion of Europe. But there's a thing called Sabbatean and Frankist. So the Jews of Eastern Europe aren't just Jews. As I have friends who are of Jewish descent and observe the Torah strictly. They wouldn't call those people even Jews, because they don't observe the Torah. They're not descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're really descendants of a group called the Sabbateans, who were Jews that apostatized from the religion of the Old Testament in the 16th century when their Messiah converted to Islam. and they started a movement to attempt to bring the Messiah more quickly by violating the Old Testament rules of morality, thinking that thereby it would call down the divine vengeance, and then the Jewish Messiah would come and set up a Jewish empire on earth. And a century after that, many of them infiltrated the Catholic Church, and those Jews are called Frankists. They have that tie with the ancient people, but they have the mentality of infiltration and spreading immorality through duplicity. And the Frankists, according to some sources, now control a good percentage of the Catholic bishops in Eastern Europe are actually Frankists by descent. And that doesn't mean that personally they're not believers in the Catholic religion, but that might explain why they got promoted. I know a lot of Poles that all hold that most of the hierarchy in Poland is Frankist. And when you see things like the prime minister or president of countries like Greece and Poland marrying Jewish women, you have to ask yourself if they themselves are Frankists and not really Christians. So that long introduction, AJ, go on.
So he would normally be playing soccer on liberal Jewish soccer teams in Wojtyla.
So was there a Catholic team?
No, there was a Catholic team, but
he didn't play with the Catholics.
Mm.
He played with the Jews. Did he ever play with the Catholics?
No.
He only played with the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
So that in pre-war Poland, that would have been extremely, extremely, extremely unusual. That's like, how could you say? That's like if you grew up in an entirely Aryan town of neo-Nazis and you only played on the black team.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the primate cardinal of Poland, August Hill, on 29th February 1936, said, "There will be a Jewish problem as long as Jews remain in Poland. It is a fact that the Jews are fighting against the Catholic Church, persisting in free thinking, and are the vanguard of godlessness, Bolshevism, and subversion. It is a fact that the Jews deceive, levy interest, and are pimps. It is a fact that the religious ethical influence of the Jewish young people on Polish people is a negative one."
Okay, so these statements aren't really anti-Semitic in any way, because just do some research on your own. Most of the online pornography companies today are owned by Jews. Most of the troll accounts on social media for whores are run by Jews. And Jews run a big business to attempt to morally degrade Christians, because it's really not, if they just tried to morally degrade Jews, there's not many clients out there, because there's only like, 6 or 12 million Jews in the whole world, but there's a lot more Christians. So it is a known fact that the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia was a Jewish revolution, and it was run by Jews. It should not be called a Russian revolution. It wasn't run by Russians, and it didn't have the purpose of defending Russia, restoring Russia, or helping Russians. And in fact, had the purpose of destroying Russia, genociding Christians, and destroying Russian culture, which is pretty much what it did. And so I would gather, AJ, that the Soviets thought very highly of Wojtyla because they knew he was Jewish and they were Jewish.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, the Nazi question. So the war breaks out, and Polish men all signed up for the Polish army. I know it's a fact because in the monastery St. Maximilian Kolbe, where we had like 1,100 vocations, 900 of them, when the war broke out, signed up for the Polish army. So it was the spirit of the age. It was the right thing to do. And you defend a Catholic country, you're Catholic, you go to war. And they weren't under solemn vows, so they were free to make the decision, and they went. And St. Maximilian gave him his blessing. So Karol, when the war breaks out, does he take arms to defend Catholic Poland?
No, and he also told his friends not to join the resistance to fight against the Nazis. And
Now, that is a position that no honest Pole would have taken in 1939. No one would have taken. That's worthy of condemnation. That's what in other countries that are patriotic, like the United States, we would call high treason. But not to defend your Catholic country against the Nazis. You know what I understand, AJ? It was already clear that the Nazi movement at that time was anti-Semitic. So he spent his whole youth playing on a Jewish team. You think he would be anti-Nazi?
no,
He was so pro-Nazi, he even joined in the war effort, didn't he?
yeah, he okay, so he was here. He was essential to the Third Reich's war efforts. He worked at the bomb production facility and also the chemical weapons facility.
Okay, so he helped them produce armaments that were used to kill innocent Christians and Jews.
Mm-hmm.
So this might seem a contradiction in behavior, but there's actually explain this kind of character in psychology. This is a person who's out for himself. He doesn't give a bleep about anyone. He has no morality. He has no loyalty. He has no charity. If he has to do something to survive, he survives. He avoids battles. He flees from conflict, and maybe you would call that a pacifist, or it's really just he's a careerist. I mean, so he betrayed his nation. Okay, and this is not a saint, and no Pole should consider John Paul II a saint who betrays your nation like that. This man should not have the honors of the altar. You're not willing to stand up for Catholic Poland, you're a piece of dirt. I don't care what your religion is. So what your status in the church is. But AJ, did he extend this kind of self-serving even matters of religion? I mean, before the Second World War, Catholics every Holy Week celebrated the Passion Play, and it was a way to relive the Passion of Christ and tell the story. Modern Jews have axes to grind about the Passion Play because, hey, the people of Judea called for the blood of Christ, and they said, let his blood be on us and our children. And so a lot of modern writers say it's anti-Semitic. What was John Paul II's position on the Passion Play?
He didn't take part in it.
He never took part in the Passion Play? Is there any record that he was ever present at a Passion Play?
Oh, they watch because, well, everyone else is watching, but
Okay. He never took a role and played it. This is strange because his career was to be an actor. He wasn't intending to be a priest, he was intending to be an actor. And he was a member of a theatrical group that was secularist. Okay. So you would think at least play a role, you know, in the Passion Play. It would be the honorable thing to do. And if you go to any part of Catholic Europe and see their processions, their festivals in honor of their saints or Christ, our Lord, or Our Lady, everyone joins in. Everyone wants their son dressed up or their daughter dressed up and in that procession and do something. It would be considered the honor of honors to play the role of Christ or Our Lady in the Passion Play or a living nativity. Even you Protestants do living nativities now, so you can understand that. Who would say, I don't want my son to play Joseph in the nativity scene? You know, who would say that? Okay, so this says a lot about the man, and also why this guy is not a saint. Okay, it has, even when matters of religion, he isn't going to put himself in a position where it risks him with any group. This is you know, this guy's a real careerist.
yeah. So when he is ordained as a priest and is sent to Saint Florian as their priest, then he is sent to Rome. Sent to Rome for his doctorate, where he didn't go too well because of the Great Dominican. And I was like, Sorry.
Yeah, so I did a report from Rome on John Paul II's doctoral thesis, and I showed pretty conclusive evidence that though he was awarded a doctorate, he never received it, and this was a diplomatic way of protecting the reputation of the Angelicum, the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, for having approved a doctorate which was modernist and phenomenological, and played games with substance and accidents, which is no intellectual would do, unless you're trying to fudge on the truth. And this is not unusual for individuals who, in morals, won't stand up for the truth because they're fudging on the truth. That's how they excuse their behavior.
So he gets back to Krakow to meet his next protector, the new Archbishop of Krakow, Baziak. And he ordered Wojtyla would take 2 more years of absence to study for another doctorate. But Wojtyla wanted to stay at St. Florian, where he could work with his students. But Baziak was adamant, demanding that Wojtyla be also moved home from the priest's house at St. Florian, that any pastoral work he wished to undertake during the 2-year sabbatical had first to be approved by the Archbishop Baziak.
Okay, so
yeah,
go ahead. This is very unusual for a newly ordained priest to be refused pastoral activity. And it's a sign that the Archbishop knew about him having liaisons with young people. That's the only reason. He did go on and get a doctorate from Lublin, I think the Lublin University, and he was awarded that doctorate, where he basically redid his thesis from Rome and got it republished again. So, but this is not a good sign. Go ahead.
So, in 1952, among the victims that were arrested was the Bishop of Katowice, Stanislaw Adamowski, 2 auxiliary bishops. In November that year, Wojtyla's latest mentor and protector, Archbishop Baziak, and his auxiliary bishop, Stanislaw Rospon, were also arrested, an action that shook the Catholic community of Krakow to its core. Karol Wojtyla said nothing publicly or privately, and 2 days after the arrest went on a skiing holiday to the Marty Mountains.
Okay, so the hierarchy is just arrested and you don't protest, you go on a vacation. So I think it's pretty clear what kind of a character this guy was. Is that heroic, AJ? No, that's a villainous coward. That's who that is. It's I'm going to protect my butt no matter what. An honest person would have at least gone to the police station and protested.
I was thinking, his mentor and protector said, no more pastoral work for you. You're out of St. Florian's. Maybe he had him arrested.
Well, what did he do in his vacation? I mean, it was like, thank God they got arrested. Now I can go play. And we have no way of knowing, but on vacations, are there pictures of him doing untoward things?
Mm-hmm.
Like?
Improperly dressed for a priest. Being too close to women.
While improperly dressed. Yes. Getting love letters from women. Okay. So we discussed this more in the show on our 3rd program on Emanuele Orlandi, and you could go watch that for more information about this.
Yeah. So throughout all this turmoil, Karol Wojtyla continued with his pastoral duties. So he returned to St. Florian after they're arrested.
Mm-hmm.
During the academic year, he would give lectures to the students on ethics. He organized retreats, said mass, heard confession, studied diligently in preparation for his thesis. Nonetheless, he continued to remain totally uninvolved in the life and death struggle of his church to secure the most basic freedoms. No amount of arrests and imprisonments could stir him into protesting. In some ways, this was a replay of his response to the Second World War. when he took no part in armed resistance and urged his friends to do the same, declaring that the Polish army had been defeated and that it was useless to fight on. During the last 3 months of 1939, the German invaders turned their attentions to the mentally ill and vulnerable of Poland. They began by implementing the psychiatric clinics in the north of the country. Over 1,000 Poles were transported from a number of clinics to a wood beside the village of Wielki and shot. A year later, nearly 300 elderly people were told they were going to the town of Baderins. No such town has ever existed. The lorry conveying them stopped in the wooded area on the outskirts of Kellis. They were gassed by the lorry's exhaust fumes and buried in the woods in Winery. As early as October 1939, less than a month after the German occupation of Poland had begun, ghettos for the Jews were being created. Sometimes they were crammed into a section of that city that had historically been occupied by Jews, as in Warsaw, where the Jews were forced to build a wall around the designation to pay for the wall.
Okay, so this is a man who would have not supported our order. He doesn't believe in risking anything of himself to help persecuted Christians. And Christians like that are pieces of scum, pieces of dirt, and words that as a friar I cannot say in public. So this is not a saint. This isn't even a person of middling virtue. That's like mediocre virtue. This is a person of a decidedly vicious character called cowardice and pragmatism. This is a person without any morals whatsoever and no belief in God and no loyalty to his fellow human beings. So this is worse than just being, vicious. There are great men who defended their nation. Jan Sobieski, for example, was one of the great kings of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. He defended Vienna so it wouldn't be invaded from the Turks. He had some children out of wedlock. He wasn't a perfectly holy man, but he didn't fail on his loyalty to his people or his loyalty to the faith. But here's a man who goes on to write a book on how to have sex called Love and Responsibility that just totally does his own country in, his own sacred hierarchy, his own religion, his own people. But he has to be with the young people and he has to hear their confessions. I think you can get an idea what he was obsessed with and where his real loyalty.
Yeah, so during this time he was beginning to get, they had a secret police agent follow him just to see what he's up to. Like, man, this guy is too perfect for us. Why is he not resisting? There's gotta be something here. He'll snoop around.
Did the Soviet a dossier on him?
Yeah. They had all of the letters, all the everything. They knew exactly about him.
Okay, and so did they think he would be a great new Bishop of Krakow?
Yeah, so he was made not the archbishop, but apostolic administrator. But he functioned, but in his mind, he functioned as the archbishop. He went around looking. He went around looking like them, and he even wore the bishop stuff at the Vatican Council.
Okay, so an apostolic administrator is a cleric appointed by the Pope to run a diocese or an archdiocese before a bishop or archbishop is named. And an apostolic administrator often does not have the dignity of the bishop. So you're saying that he was an apostolic administrator and he was dressing as a bishop when he wasn't a bishop? Let me see this. Let's look it up. When he was appointed apostolic.
And he was bossing people around, bossing priests around, and they were getting fed up with him doing that. So they were writing to Winnicki, the primate of Poland, and like, shut this guy up or something. We're getting tired of him bossing us around, and we're the bishops of these dioceses, and he's bossing us around.
Okay, so that's decidedly not holy behavior. But let me just look at the facts here. He was appointed auxiliary bishop of Krakow on the 4th of July, 1958, and with the titular see of Antigonea, which was changed months later to Ombi. He doesn't become archbishop until the 13th of January, 1964. That's just after this. That's 2 years into, or year and a half into, the Second Vatican Council. So he does have the dignity of a bishop, but he isn't the Archbishop of Krakow. Let's see who the Bishop of Krakow was in 58.
I think it was Baziak.
Yeah, let me just check this. Krakow. It looks like, no, it wasn't Baziak. It looks like Krakow. This bishop died in 1951, and there was no archbishop. This sounds strange. I mean, it doesn't seem there was an archbishop from 1951 until he was appointed in 64. Let me see. That'd be very bizarre. So the see was left empty?
Yeah.
Why was he named auxiliary? So that's really bizarre. Let me see.
Well, I guess they had to give him something so he seemed important.
So evidently the Vatican didn't get permission from the Soviet regime to name an archbishop, so they named an auxiliary. But still, as an auxiliary, he's not the bishop, and so he shouldn't have been acting like the bishop. And he should have known that. A humble man would have known that.
Yeah, and so it takes like 7 tries for the Soviets to get Wazinski, the primate of Poland, to sign off on Wojtyla. He would hand him a list, say, "We want this guy for the Archbishop of Krakow. He'd be awesome. He'd be good pastor." Like, okay, we'll take it back to our superiors.
So the Soviets refused 7 nominations by the primate of Poland, and they only accepted Wojtyla.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in the height of the Cold War, you know what that means. They knew who would be the collaborator.
So then, in May of 1967, Paul VI announced the next consistory, or Council of Cardinals. Among the names of the cardinals-elect was Karol Wojtyla. This news of yet another promotion came a few days after his 47th birthday, and came great surprise within Poland. Now, papal biographers have written freely that by this time, the communists had long realized that they had made a dreadful mistake. But in reality, they were dancing up and down saying, we are almost up, we are almost up.
Okay, so it's pretty clear that you don't go from auxiliary bishop to Archbishop of Krakow to cardinal in a matter of a few years unless the Soviets were totally behind you becoming a cardinal. And they wouldn't do that unless they knew that you would vote in a conclave the way they wanted.
Yeah.
This is a really bad sign. Paul VI was, according to many sources here in Italy that have never been refuted, a lifelong sodomite who was blackmailed by the Soviets to hand over a list of all the Catholic priests in Russia. We know that from the Lutheran Archbishop of Stockholm, who got that information and handed it on to the church years later. So he was a traitor. He was compromised. And you could almost maybe conjecture, I think, on good grounds that the Soviets say will reveal to the world that you are a sodomite unless you appoint Wojtyla as cardinal, and that would be enough to get Paul VI to do it, because Paul VI was a really unsavory character, and he's not worthy to be called a saint either. So
through that time, he's just doing what he does. Then by 1976, he makes his second visit to the United States. Now, Wojtyla he was very, very anti-American in his letters and and everything. And they had to get a Polish woman to be the help with PR and everything. Dr. Anna Teresa Time whatever.
Yeah, and she was Jewish, and she was a lifelong friend of John Paul II. She's the one that wrote him love letters, or letters that many people considered love letters. She was the one that invited him to a philosophical conference in the United States on Husserl. And so he comes to America, and we did a whole program on John Paul II in America, but we didn't know that he was anti-American. But after his visit to the United States, he changes a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, so when he becomes connected to the CIA in this visit, his attitude changes 180 degrees.
Yeah, and that was probably because he got money. And this is the thing that will convince any careerist. And once he becomes Pope, we've talked this many times, he starts helping the CIA flush money into the Solidarity movement and to bring down the Polish government, the communist government, which doesn't make any sense because he had no problem with them before when they were arresting all his friends, shooting them, or the Nazis invading his country. All of a sudden he becomes a nationalist. Yeah. Don't you believe it?
And the man who is his handler while Pope for the CIA's CIA Director William Casey, and he begins his meetings on April 23rd, 1981, right when he begins his work.
Okay, so, and we will discuss more of this in our program on the murder, on our second program on the murder of John Paul I and John Paul II's role in that. And we've already discussed it already in the 3 programs we've done in Marcinkus, Paul Marcinkus, 2 or 3, I think. And do you want to end the background on Karol here? Or do you want to continue through his papacy, some things?
Well, let's. I want to also touch on that in early June 1981, when things were going on with Yugoslavia, the U.S. State Department at their embassy in Belgrade asked their ambassador to get a hold of all the messages and get them back into the State Department. Well, Yugoslavia was about to fall, and then it would have been Artia. No. So Medjugorje was in a Gladiolop because Yugoslavia was Soviet controlled, and it was through the State Department that they pushed this fake apparition, the fake seers, and they pushed for the creation of Bosnia-Herzegovina and the ending of Yugoslavia. And it's through the State Department that they pushed the pilgrims going there to that Alabama group and other pilgrim organizations that push Medjugorje.
Okay, so this news doesn't surprise me because there's a big inconsistency in the whole narrative of Our Lady of Medjugorje. Our Lady appears, she's the Queen of Peace. You pray the rosary and she'll give you peace. But what happens in Yugoslavia after the apparition? One of the most bloody civil wars of the entire history of the Balkans break out. And you have Catholics at war with Orthodox, at war with Muslims, or who are at war with Catholics, who are at war with, everyone was at war with everyone. And tens of thousands of people were murdered. And everyone starts shooting at everyone. And the country, Yugoslavia disintegrates, which is not what the Soviet Union wanted. but definitely what Skull and Bones wanted. And where do all these people get these guns to start shooting everyone and like that? So if Our Lady truly appeared, since she's the Queen of Heaven and Earth, she can give peace.
Yeah.
And she promised peace at Fatima, and she gave peace at the end of the First World War. Poland never torn apart by civil wars. And people who believe in Our Lady don't start shooting everyone. We're not pacifists, but we know how to not start conflicts that are unnecessary, you know. Okay. Mm. It's easier to buy land from your neighbor than kill him for it. Okay. It's also more moral. And however, this is very much like a CIA propaganda narrative. Because if you're going to take down a country with a civil war, but you don't want anyone to know it, you start a propaganda operation that says, Our Lady's come from heaven, and she's promised peace for everyone. Peace, 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 peace. Go there and pray to Our Lady for peace, and you're using it for promote gun running or whatever, you know. With all the people going to Medjugorje, they probably were gun running. They were probably bringing in finances, and they were probably promoting the war. Because you didn't get peace. And even the most devout devotees of Medjugorje will say that only one of the seers has been faithful, the others started making things up. And of course, they were hailed in the West and they were made wealthy, and they all ran off and married people. They didn't remain chaste virgins like all the other people who saw Our Lady. If you see Our Lady in her beauty, in her beauty as a virgin, you see Our Lady in glory, you would never want to marry again. All the saints who've seen Our Lady, they lost all desire of marriage because they realized the real purpose of human existence is this honor and glory of God and living a life in God, which is far more joyful than the married state. It's not saying marriage is evil, but you know, there's the better and the best. Okay, so you know, John Paul II, I always wondered why. Why didn't he come out and make some statement about Medjugorje? And the Vatican's been hedging with Medjugorje for like 40 years, as if they know there's something wrong with it, but someone bending their arm and telling them don't speak against it. And this probably is because the CIA already had big claws inside the Vatican Bank. So I want to thank you. Go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, so we're going to end it here, folks, and we'll pick it up with his later years and how secretary sort of becomes a second Polish secret pope.
Okay, thank you for having me on this program, AJ, about the real character of Karol Wojtyla and his unheroic life.
This is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Dad's fault.
Dad's fault.